with, but I'll reiterate that we're talking about the cost of living in Australia. And we have George with us here from Sydney, and my name is Rena, and I'm from Hobart. So we've just been talking a little bit about accommodation in Sydney and the different types of accommodation that are available to you as students. Again, if you have any questions about accommodation in Sydney or Tasmania or Australia, start popping it in the comments section or in your chat windows, and we'll get to them very soon. So in Tasmania, I would reiterate what George has said. So you've got your homestays, you've got your rental accommodation, which you can rent yourself, your student accommodation, or you can do flat shares as well. And in Tasmania, it tends to be a fair bit less expensive than it is in Sydney, just because of the population size and demand and that sort of a thing. So that's something to keep in mind when you're thinking about living costs in Australia. So the second major regular expense we have is our transport and travel expenses around the city and to university or college campuses. So, George, tell us a bit about the transport options available in Sydney.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Sydney, being one of the most cosmopolitan cities in the world, has a really good train system, or you would call them the country's subway or metro. And the network they have is quite extensive. It doesn't operate 24 hours, as unlike other metros in the world, but it does open in between 4 a.m. to 1 a.m. So it's only really closed for about 3 hours after midnight. When it comes to the pricing, basically the way the city works is, the city's in the middle and the city expands. Expands actually towards the west and the north and the south. Towards the east is actually the water. But basically, when it comes to the pricing of a train ticket, the further you live away from the city, the more expensive it'll be. That means that if you were to live close to the city, technically, you will be spending less. If you were to live right in the city, which is where you potentially might be studying as well, you don't even need to spend anything in transport because you may be actually just walking directly to your location to study. Let's say, as an average, when it comes to you traveling from your home to your place of study, you will be spending something like $40 a week, and that will give you basically the trips back and forth from home to your school. In Sydney, there's something called the Opal car. It's one single car, and it basically allows you to get on trains, buses, and every single transportation system. We even have ferries as well. So Sydney, being on the waterfront, has a river as well that is going to the city, and you can even, if you were to live close to one of those, go to the city on a boat.
Yeah. I remember that's what I did when I lived in Sydney. I used to catch a ferry every day to work and to school. It was amazing. I definitely recommend it. You feel like a tourist every single day. I'd like to welcome Yashinni here, who's joined our session now. So Yashinni is from StudyAdelaide. Would you like to tell us a bit about yourself, Yashinni?
So I'm an ex-international student myself. So I came to when I was 17 years old. So I've studied at university here myself. I've gone through the international student experience as well. And now I've ended up working here.
Yeah, great. Look, we've been talking so far about accommodation, and we've been talking about transport and travel expenses in Australia. Would you like to tell us a little bit about accommodation in Adelaide? Because we've been talking about it in Sydney and Hobart so far, but as we know, these things are really different between Australian cities. So, yeah, we'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
Cool. So in terms of accommodation options, I guess George sort of covered all bases before. The biggest difference would probably be the cost of it in Adelaide is significantly cheaper due to it being a smaller city, obviously. So in terms of student apartments and residential colleges, and that it probably starts from about $210 up to anywhere between $350 to $400.
That's a week.
And again, that's Australian dollars. And in terms of private rental, it starts from anywhere from $100. So myself, for example, I'm renting a house and I'm paying about $220 myself, and I've got a 2-bedroom house that I share with a housemate. So that, I guess, and I live about 10 minutes out from the city, so I guess that gives a bit of a idea in terms of how much it costs and the distance and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and that's per week, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, great. And in terms of the public transport system or transport options for students in Adelaide, can you tell us a bit about that?
Yep. So similar to Sydney, I guess we've got the buses, the trains, and the trams. We don't have a ferry. We've got a Popeye in the river that's in the middle of the city. But in terms of public transport costs, most students that are in Adelaide, even when I was a student, I tend to walk a fair bit because it's quite easy to walk around. It's a safe city as well.
Yeah.
You've got bicycle. It's quite easy to ride around. Australia's quite safe, I think. You've got bicycle lanes and that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
And then you've got buses, trains, and trams, which connects you all over the city. And in terms of pricing wise, I guess for students, there's a 28-day pass which costs about $49, and that gives you unlimited travel for 28 days. So that's one way to budget out if you're a student, because you are trying to cut costs if you're going to uni, going to part-time work, or just hanging out with friends. And it's the same card across all public transport as well, so it's quite easy to navigate yourself around. You don't have to carry 3 different cards or anything like that.
Yeah, look, I was saying in one of our sessions yesterday that Melbourne, was voted one of the most livable cities in the world 7 times in a row, and Adelaide's been featured on that list before as well. So I think public transport has a massive part to play in that, and the ease of public transport in Australia as a whole between all of our states. Look, the third thing that I'd like to talk about in terms of, the 3 things that come to mind when we think about the cost of living in Australia is food expenses and grocery expenses. So, Yashinni, could you tell us how much we might expect to spend in grocery shopping at Australian supermarkets and in Adelaide?
So in my personal experience, again, when I was a student a couple of years ago, I probably budgeted about $50 to $60 a week, and that's because I tended to go to the to Central Market, which is probably one of the best places to get cheap food, because on the weekends and that the market isn't open on Sunday, so a lot of vendors try to sell off their food cheap.
Yeah.
So for students, it's a bargain. You can get a punnet of 3 punnets of strawberries for $1. It could vary, I guess, from $50 to $100, depending on how much you eat as well.
Yeah.
To drill down a bit more, so a loaf of bread in Australia is about 95 cents if you wanted to get a generic brand, and a litre of milk is anywhere from $1 to $3, depending on what kind of milk you drink as well.
Yeah.
And then you've got your fresh fruits and veg again. If you want to really cut costs, you could buy it at a market. You can buy it at a supermarket, and it's fairly cheap and fresh as well.
Yeah. Great. And George, is that sort of the same in Sydney? Would you have anything to add?
Yeah, absolutely. I guess the point to probably highlight is cooking versus eating out.
Yeah.
So if you were to cook yourself, you definitely will be saving a lot of money. And I know that as an international student, wherever you're coming from, it may not be the case that you know how to cook, but if you can get yourself into cooking when you come here, that is going to save you a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we're talking about even basic things like noodles and rice and that sort of thing. But yeah, do get yourself started into trying and getting someone to teach you how to cook if you don't know, because that can make a difference when it comes to your budget. Eating out is an option, and some people do it. The cheapest you will ever find, it'll be like going for fast food restaurants where you will be paying something like $7 for a meal. And if you were to do that 3 times a day, that's $21 a day. So that is how much you will be spending if you were to eat out, if you were not to cook yourself. But again, that if you do the math again, times 7 days a week, you're going to be breaking it back if you do that every day. So the recommendation will always be cooking. And then there are so many options here when it comes to grocery stores for you to go to. But there's also places like Aldi, if you're familiar with that brand from Germany, which basically sells products really, really cheap. That are wide brands essentially, and they usually at 60%, if not 50% of the price of just a regular grocery store. That probably summarizes my point about that, and that's pretty much the same cost, I'll say, across Australia. It's not that much difference when it comes to the produce.
Yeah. Great. Well, let's talk about what we should expect in terms of course fees now, which is a huge investment, so definitely something worth talking about as part of this session today. But George, could you tell us about the average fees for universities in Australia?
Yes, so we're talking about universities, and I'm saying
Universities.
universities because there's of course colleges, and there's also as well places in which you can study English. So when we're looking at universities, there's 43 universities in Australia, and if you were to average what a fee will be, you're looking at something like around 30,000 Australian dollars per year, and that's just an average. Of course, that will depend on the university and will depend also on the program. What could be the difference? So to give you an example. There are universities where you will be studying an MBA that can cost you close to $50,000 a year.
Yeah.
But that's of course on the top end. When it comes to the bottom end, and there will be universities where the yearly fees may only be just over $20,000. So it all depends, right? But as an average, when we're looking at all of the providers, it's something around $30,000 Australian per year.
Yeah, great. So that's universities. What about colleges?
It ranges. The lowest fees you probably will again find when it comes to colleges for you to do a diploma or an advanced diploma in different subjects. It's in between 6,000 to 15,000. So
Yeah.
within that range is where you will find a yearly fee to be for institutes and places like that, vocational providers essentially.
Great. And so the final one that we'll talk about in terms of fees then is English language schools. What kind of fees will we pay at English language schools?
It will depend again whether you are studying at an institute that specializes on teaching English as a second language, or if you will do it within the a language faculty of a university or the language institute of a university. So universities tend to be more expensive. It can go as high as $450 a week, whereas the normal price for institute is around $300. They from time to time run promotions, and the lowest you will probably able to find is something like $180 per week, and that'll be, for instance, evening classes, and it comes at a price, of course, that frankly is actually lower. But as an average, you're looking at something like $250, $300 for institutes, and between $350 to $450 a week for universities. And bear in mind that, and this is something that we haven't actually talked about today, international students in Australia can actually work part-time, a maximum of 40 hours per fortnight. So all these costs, whether it's accommodation, transportation, living expenses, you could say that just with the minimum wage available in this country, you probably will be able to cover it without issues. Again, as long as you're cooking and then you're not living in the most expensive place in the city, right? You should be fine. But yeah, those are basically the fees.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. Yeah. Look, I will reach out to all of our friends watching today, so keep asking us questions in Facebook and in the Q&A panel in the webinar, if that's where you're joining us from. Just shoot us an emoji or something like that, just to let us know that you're here and that you're listening. We want to hear from you. So this is the last question from me before we move on to our question and answers session. I understand that the government requires us to give them some financial details before they'll grant us a student visa. So could you tell us a little bit more about that, George?
Sure. So as an international student, you are to provide financial documents that confirm that you have enough funds to be able to study in Australia as an international student. It is a law. And basically, it will depend again on the length of time that you'll be studying, whether it is 12 months and more or 12 months and less. Also, whether you are coming by yourself or if you're coming with dependents, say, for instance, a wife and a kid, if you were to come here in those circumstances. So by law, the government requires you to have, say, for 12 months of study, the equivalent of 21,000 Australian dollars. It's exactly 20,290, but say 21,000 available on a bank account so that you can actually demonstrate that you have that to cover your expenses. That is separate to the fees, and basically you need to provide confirmation that you also have enough money to pay for your fees as well. So you need to provide at least proof for the first 12 months. So that's it. And it also depends on what country citizenship you have. whether this will be more of an issue or not. But just in average, those will be the fee years. If you again have a dependent coming with you, you are requested to have $7,000 for your wife and $3,000 for your kid if they're coming as well. That's within 12 months. If you're studying less than 12 months, you just need to prorate that figure. So say, for instance, if you're coming for 6 months only, it'll be half the figure that I just mentioned.
Great. Yeah, thank you. I'll ask you to turn up your audio a little bit, George, just so we can hear you a little bit better. We'll hold the mic a bit closer. But what we're going to do now is start our question and answer session of the video today. So we have friends joining us on our webinar who have started asking us questions. Friends on Facebook are a little bit quiet, so please feel free to start asking us questions whenever you're ready. But on our webinar, we have a question from Rebecca here about how much she'll pay in bills like electricity, phone and Wi-Fi. So let's start with Wi-Fi costs because we know how important the internet is as a student. Yashinni, do you want to tell us a little bit about the kind of fees we could expect to pay for internet, say per month or per week?
Yeah. So usually if you live in student apartments or student accommodation, internet and bills are generally included as part of the rental cost already.
Yeah.
And same with homestay as well. The homestay family should is expected to provide you with the fees are inclusive of the bills and Wi-Fi connection and stuff like that. But if you are living in a private rental property, Wi-Fi costs per month could range anywhere between $50 to $100 depending on how many gig you want and how quick internet speed you want and that sort of stuff. So there's a few variables, but it starts anywhere from $50 a month.
Yeah, great. And what about things like phone bills and electricity bills?
So electricity bills in Australia, they pay it by quarter, so every 3 months you get a bill, which was quite weird for me when I first came to Australia because back in my country we paid on a monthly basis. But again, electricity bills, it really comes down to how much electricity you use at home as well.
Yeah.
So it could range anywhere from $180 per quarter up to $500. So usually in winter it tends to get a bit more, and even in summer. Because usually in winter we tend to have the heaters on, and in summer we have the air conditioning on. So again, it depends on how smart you are. There are other ways to heat yourself up using a hot water bottle, or be creative, have a stand fan and things like that. So It really comes down to how smart you are with electricity, I guess. And in terms of phone bills, so again there is phone plans and phone prepaid. So that again ranges anywhere from $30 up to $100 depending on how much calls you're going to make, how much internet you want, how much international calls you're going to make, etc.
Yeah, great. We have another question here from, let's see. Sorry, bear with me. So how can we international students find work easily in Perth? And that's from Fiona. So we don't have Perth experts with us today, but we can talk a little bit about how it's possible to find work in Australia. Who would like to answer that one? Yashinni, would you like to start?
I can talk from my own personal experience. I think it's probably the best way to do it. I think step number one, there's a lot of services available from institutions generally. You have to reach out to them. They're not going to come running to you.
Yeah.
So there are career services in universities, generally in colleges as well. There are people there to help you. So at StudyAdelaide, for example, we've got a dedicated student engagement manager who has one-on-one interviews with students just to help them out with their resume, mock interviews and things like that. And in terms of getting a job, you've really just got to get out there. In Australia, it's not uncommon to walk into a shop and give them their resume and introduce yourself. It's not uncommon to go online and apply for jobs, but you've really got to, take the initiative to go one step further, because if you really want a job, you're going to try and get it anyway. So when I first came, for example, in my second or third week, I went to probably, fast food restaurants, retail shops, food courts, and just dropped my resume off everywhere because I wasn't picky at that stage.
Yeah.
I knew that I needed to get some sort of experience in order to get a better job, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you have anything to add to that, George?
Yes, so basically the unemployment rate in Australia, which averages on around 5%, is way lower than it'll be in many other countries. And what that means is that there's, of course, more jobs. You may think that finding a job in your home country is actually hard so many times. And not to say that here is not hard either, but there are definitely more opportunities. And just like Yashinni mentioned it, sometimes you can just get hired by simply stepping into a cafe and then being able to communicate that you can actually work with them, that you have the experience and all those sort of things. You can also divide the types of jobs that are available here between, of course, unqualified and qualified jobs. One of the limitations the students have is that they can only work part-time. They're here in Australia to study and not to work full-time, and that means that the opportunities of working on a highly qualified role are scarce. It's not impossible because I know of international students that can actually do it and have managed to do it, find a good job that is part-time, but at the same time, the big majority will actually be working on unskilled types of jobs. That includes, for instance, working at a cafe, working at a, say, car dealer, washing cars, jobs that will allow you to make money because, again, the minimum wage in Australia, you're looking over $18 an hour, and be able to cover your expenses, but, don't need to be qualified or anything really.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I have a few networks in Perth and a few friends there who are international students as well, and they found work through doing internships. So they did internships back to back until they found a workplace that really suited them, and they transitioned into a role after that internship while they were studying. So that's also another option. I don't know if you'd say it's an easy option, but it was a really good way to find a qualified role for them.
The question was about how easily can students find a role in Western Australia again, and it's the same thing for other cities in Australia. You need to go into websites like Gumtree.com.au and places where you can apply online and try to find. The same principle again applies, which is you need to try to connect with as many students as possible, where you could be asking them, hey, do you know about a job maybe where you work or that sort of thing. I know so many international students that that's basically how they find a job. They basically within their peers recommend each other and they tell each other about opportunities they might have seen or might know, and then that. They also can connect on Facebook groups on their nationalities where usually somebody might be posting information about a job. But yes, basically, just like Yashinni mentioned earlier, you need to be proactive when it comes to trying to find it.
Yeah, definitely. Look, our Q&A session is still going for those of you who have just joined us. So please keep asking us questions through the webinar Q&A and also through Facebook comments if you're with us from Facebook Live. So we have a question here from our webinar, and it's from Alan, who says, what websites do you recommend for finding accommodation? And is it possible to lock accommodation in Australia while he's still overseas? Yashinni, would you like to chat with us about that?
Yeah, I can. So with in Adelaide particularly, I guess we've got a student housing website called AdelaideStudentHousing.com.au, and that has a listing of all the accommodations you can find in Adelaide. And then again, there's purpose-built student accommodation. So generally, I guess if you go on Google itself and just type in student accommodation in the particular city you're after, you'll generally find a list of them. In terms of homestay, that's where it gets a bit tricky because there are laws, I guess, again, around what kind of families can actually host the student because they have to go through police clearance and that sort of stuff. So generally, your institutions or universities should have an accommodation contact person there. Otherwise, in private or shared rental, there are general sort of housing websites. So there's, I forgot what it is now, realestate.com.au, and there's a few other websites as well.
Great.
I think those websites like realestate.com.au are for you to rent a whole apartment or a whole house. If you want to just basically get a room, there's things like flatmates.com.au where you will just find people that are renting maybe just a room to share within a house. And you can find, say, rooms that are all contained, everything, internet, all electricity and all the other things that you need to pay for, say, $240, $250 a week. about half-hour away from the city.
Yeah, and we were just showing you then a screenshot of Gumtree and how easy it is to find flat shares on that. So sometimes you can lock that in while you're still overseas. It depends how good you are at communicating with the people who own the property or have the main rental agreement with that property.
Actually, just another point, and it's deposits. So in some countries, you don't need to pay a deposit when it comes to renting a place. That's a very common understanding in other countries. But in Australia, basically, you are required to pay a bond, a deposit in advance that is completely refundable right at the end. But sometimes it catches people by surprise because they don't know they need to maybe potentially put together, say, $1,000 that they need to pay as a deposit at the very beginning. And it's money that you may be having to consider again in advance for when you are actually organizing your accommodation.
Yeah, great. We have a question here from Jay Possin. Sorry if I've mispronounced that. He's asked about course fees, I guess living expenses generally and course fees generally. I feel like this is a good opportunity to talk a little bit about scholarships very briefly. George, would you like to give us an overview of that? It's a big topic, so just a little snapshot.
I think we are going to have later next week a session on scholarships, so I encourage you to go to our website, superior.com. Right at the top, it says webinar. You can click there, and they will bring you to the whole site where we have all these webinars. There's one about scholarships, the hard facts about scholarships, and it tells you exactly how it works in Australia.
Yeah.
But just to give you an idea quickly, without in anticipation to that session, scholarships are that are either full or partial. It will depend a lot on your academic record. Mm-hmm. Full scholarships, where you are covered for everything, are very limited in terms of numbers. So if you're thinking of coming here to Australia on a full scholarship, that means that you are brilliant back where you live. Mm-hmm. I know so many cases of students that are just with such good experience, with an impeccable English, and yet they don't qualify for a full scholarship. And with high GPAs back in their undergraduates, and they still don't. So, having said that, universities again looking to students that have really good results and will be able to grant so many times partial scholarships that ranging between 10 to 25% of the whole fees, but that actually is available to prospective students that have really, really good grades.
Great. Well, we have time for just 2 more questions, so please ask us anything you have on your mind. This is your last opportunity to do so in this session today. But I have a question here from Soumya. She's asked if it's cheaper to live further away from the city or if she'd be paying the same in transport to university anyway. What are your thoughts on that? Yashinni, would you like to answer that one?
Sure. It's a bit of a tricky question, that one, actually. It depends if you work part-time or not as well, I think, because it depends on how much your transport costs, depends on how much you need to travel back and forth. I still think living a little bit out of the city is cheaper, purely because, like the rental costs are a lot cheaper outside of the city. In saying that, the cost of living in Adelaide is significantly cheaper, so if you live 5 minutes out of the city, you can still walk into the city. It's quite common here, where people still walk through the parklands to get to the city. And public transport as well, they have this thing called 2-section. This might be a bit complicated, but if you live within 3 kilometres of the city, your public transport fare is half the price.
Yeah.
So there is still that, I guess it makes it, again, a bit cheaper with public transport as well. I don't know. What are your thoughts, George, on that?
Same. Basically, Sydney is a really big city. We're talking about 4.5 million people, and it's a city that expands to the west. What happens is that if, of course, you live closer to the city, it'll be more expensive. So it all depends not only on whether you have a job or not, all the commitments, but where you need to study, whether your university or institution is located in the city or is located in the west of Sydney, as an example.
Yeah.
So if say for instance, I'll give a real life example. University of Western Sydney, located in Parramatta, west of the city, about half hour. You could be living around that area, and that'll be way cheaper than it'll be living closer to the city. Also, you don't need to spend as much in transportation because you're going to be living close to the university as well. So within the same city, you may be saving a lot of money depending on where you study.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's something that you need to calculate and do the math yourself as to whereabouts you should be living, and whether it is better to live far from the place that you study or not, and yeah, because it changes really.
Great, thanks for that. So we've got Jibin, Sunil, and Wakas here saying hello. So hello, and then we have another question here from George, and he's asked, how much from the total fees do I have to pay upfront in an English course, and how many installments can be requested? That's a hard question to answer live. But I'll put it out to you. George, do you perhaps want to answer that one?
Sure. So you are required to pay at least the first 12 months. If you're doing more than 12 months. If you're only coming here for 6 months, you're required to pay the 6 months in advance. Then after that, you can pay the rest of it on the different intakes that you will go through. Same happens with a degree. So if you were to come here to study for 2 years or 3 years, you don't need to pay the 3 years in total. You only need to pay the commencement fee, which usually is in between first semester or the first year. So same applies for English. And so you're looking at having to pay, depending on the classes that you're doing, something like $6,000 to $10,000, depending on the course that you're actually doing for English, as an example. Advance.
Great, thank you. So I'll ask you to turn up your audio a little bit, or if you can speak a little bit louder to us so we can hear you a bit better. But we have one last question to go, and it's from Bernadette, and this one's about Adelaide. So Bernadette says she knows that Adelaide isn't as big a city as Sydney, but wants to know if the universities there have many students and what kind of fun things there are to do in Adelaide outside of study. So Yashinni.
That's a good one. So in Adelaide itself, there are over 35,000 international students currently in Adelaide. And in the universities itself, it's quite a good mix, I say. So when I was studying, for example, in my classroom, there was still a good mix of international and domestic students. So there's that good, I guess, opportunity for you to meet Australian people, make new friends, and also improve your English language skills if you wanted to do that as well. Outside of study, there is a fair bit to do. So we are known as the 20-minute city. So it takes about 20 minutes for you to get to the beach. It takes about 20 minutes for you to get to the hills. And then walking around the city itself, there's lots to see in the city. In terms of fun things to do, myself, for example, on the weekends, I generally go down to the beach because it's that easy to get to. The tram takes you right up to the beach. You can also go up to the hills. There's wildlife parks, there's wineries. And then in the city itself, what I know a lot of students currently do actually is that they tend to rent a bicycle for free and just ride around the city because there's lots to discover. There's little hidden spots and hidden gems around the city that students generally like to discover.
Yeah, great.
So there's lots of little things to do. Yeah, it's fun.
Big things to do too. I mean, the universities often organise, events, and you've got sporting teams as well, and all the rest of it.
Yeah,
as well.
that's right.
Yeah.
And throughout the year as well, we generally understand that students might not have the budget to, pay to attend a footy game or spend money to go to the movies. And what we do is we tend to give out lots of freebies as well.
Okay.
So if you are considering coming to Adelaide, follow our Facebook page. I guess that's where you get lots of updates in terms of what's happening and what freebies we're giving out as well.
Yeah, great.
I think this is a really good point about another expense that most people don't calculate, and it's entertainment. And that is because international students are here to study, and yes, they need to pay for transportation and accommodation, but there are so many other things that need to be done. And as an international student, and that'll be your experience. So the cities and the councils and the governments usually offer a lot of events that are completely free of charge, happening on weekends or weekdays. So you just have to be looking out for all these things and then be able to enjoy these many things. But same as other cities all over the world, you might get a cinema that is cheaper for students on specific days, say Tuesdays, things like that. So it's about, of course, staying up to date with where you can actually find better value for entertainment.
Yeah, great. Look, I have a question here from Wakas, and it's actually a great question because it's a good segue into the next segment of our video today. But Wakas asked this question. He says that he's already signed up, and I assume that means signed up to Sofiri. And he's asked how he can submit his GTE. So George, that's a good question for you as the founder of Sofiri. Can you give us an answer?
Thank you, Rina. Well, we are going to be showing you in a second just a quick video on how Sofiri works, how you sign up, how you complete your profile, and how you can find an expert that can actually help you with it. But basically, once you have been discussing with your expert the study options and what you want to study, they'll make a request for you to send some documents, upload some documents, and of course, a copy of your passport, your academic results, so on and so forth. And amongst those, there will be a form for you to complete. It is called GTE, that stands for Genuine Temporary Entrant. And that is basically just a series of questions for you to confirm the point of view coming here to Australia as an international student. So it's a form, and that basically will be given to you by your expert as an email that you're going to be getting as a request. But then, as you mentioned, Rina, that's a good segue into you now being able to demonstrate how Sofiri works quickly.
Yeah, all right. So, yeah, what we'll do in this next segment is just show you how you can continue this conversation one-on-one with someone who is an expert in education as well. So stay tuned. But for now, we'll say goodbye to George and Yashinni. It's been wonderful to hear your thoughts on this topic and to hear your advice for people who are considering coming to Australia to study. So thanks, guys. I'll let you go now, and I'll take our friends here through a tutorial on how you can speak with an education counsellor now. If you're joining us from the webinar, click on the link through the chat window that George is about to pop in there. And as I said, if you're on Facebook, stay tuned. But thank you very much, George and Yashinni. We'll let you go now, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Rina.
Thanks, guys.
Hi everyone, thanks for joining our live video session today. What I'm going to do now is show you how to get your very own Sofiri education expert. You'll get free education counselling that is tailor-made for your situation, and you can chat about courses, universities, colleges, or whatever it is you're after from your education journey in Australia. They'll also help you make your application and even apply for a student visa if you need one. All right, here we go. So if you're not already signed up to Sofiri, head over onto sofiri.com and click sign up. Enter in the email address you'd like to use along with a password and hit the sign up button. You'll be sent an email asking you to verify that it was you who signed up with us. So all you need to do here is click through the email and you're in. Okay, so at the beginning you'll see a quick little video showing you how Sofiri works. And I do recommend giving it a watch if you have some time. Once you click on My Profile, you'll need to enter in a few of your details so our education experts can have a good idea of where to begin a conversation with you. We are HTTPS and hosted in Australia, so you can be confident that your details are 100% secure. You'll need to enter in your given name, your surname, your date of birth, your email address, your country of citizenship, your current location, and your phone number. In the additional details box, you can select your highest level of study achieved and your latest degree and language that you prefer to chat in to give your education expert a little bit more information about yourself. Once you've done this, it'll be time to choose your education expert. So you'll click on Find an Expert, and in the box here you'll enter in where you'd like to study, what discipline you'd like to study, and your intended level of study. And that's important for you to pop in there because that's information that will again be sent to your education expert so that they can have the best information possible to help inform their advice to you. So I'm having a look at the listings here, and I can see that there's Laurie here with 13 years of experience. She's from Sydney, Australia, and she speaks English. So I'm going to read more about Laurie. And I can see that I'm happy with her bio, and I'd like to have a chat with her directly. So I'm going to click choose. So Laurie's online right now. I can see from that little green highlighted box next to her name. And I can expect Laurie to respond to me as soon as she's seen my message. She's got my details, so she knows a little bit about my story and will soon be able to start talking about courses and universities or colleges. Laurie will also make a study application on my behalf once I've chosen where and what I'd like to study. We can make up to 3 applications together, and she'll guide me through the whole process. So this is an important piece of information for you to know, which is that all the guidance and advice and services that Laurie provides me with are completely free. So if I choose to accept my offer at a university or college, I'll pay the same course fees to them as if I'd done it myself with them directly. So Laurie is simply here to make the entire process easier for me. And that's it. So you can head on over now to sofuri.com to sign up. And again, I'd like to thank you for joining our live video session today. And if you head on over to Facebook and find this video recording, feel free to post up any more questions that you have for us about the topic we've spoken about. We're more than happy to answer you. And I hope to see you at more of our sessions in the future.